Bill, the lawman Umansky on the show today. And, to kick things off, I want to take it back to before you became a lawyer and discuss how you changed your mindset, from feeling like a victim to someone who could not only help themselves, but just help so many other people. So, what was that like? What was that shift all about?
Yeah, you know, I don't like to, once you switch that mindset, it's always painful to go back, because it's just like you don't really want to remember it. I think it's human nature, at least if you're an optimist, to forget the things that were negative. But I know the shift happened when I was in college. I'm not going to give you the whole story, but 13, my father leaves. Um, it was everyone else's fault. My dad's fault, my mom's fault. I blame my mom for a number of different reasons. In fact, I'm learning now not to get into specific reasons because when my mom hears my stuff, she calls me and blasts me out. She's a very private person. But ultimately, I blamed everyone for everything. So I went to three different schools. Three different schools, were thrown out of three different schools and had major issues. I was getting involved with drugs and alcohol at an early age, continually getting in trouble. And I feel like part of the shift a little bit was when I went to an all black school where there were very few white children and experienced kind of the prejudice that actually came back, believe it or not. I think maybe Eminem, but I can't rap. And I had to really figure out a way to navigate that school because my first day I was beaten up and because of my
Wow.
color. I mean, yeah, it's not a feel bad thing, but I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So imagine being beaten up on your first day at school and trying to figure out how every day was going to be after that. So there was fight after fight after fight. And what I did was I just used I just kind of used my sense of humor. So the new targets were the teachers, which is probably what explains why I got thrown out of schools. And I used a lot of humor and I would go after the teachers. I'm pretty sarcastic guy. And basically bottom line, very, very simply put, I got my classmates and even the people that beat me up to laugh over time. And I became very, very popular for who I was, considering that I was an outsider. Now, that didn't change my whole mindset, Chris, but I think what it did was I realized through that experience that I was not acting like a victim. I didn't realize this, of course, at the time. I was young and dumb, but I think it prepared me for the future. And what happened was I realized, wow, I used to get beat up by these kids because of the color of my skin and had nothing really in common, but through time, developing a sense of humor, developing a strategy essentially of survival, I crossed that and actually became friends and learned a lot about culture and a lot of other things that I didn't know. And I think underneath all of that, Chris, was the fact that I was preparing myself to not be a victim and blame anyone. Because I could have gone to school and just been, keep my head down and just be afraid and have fear. But on my own, I was able to kind of use strategy, humor, which ended up becoming a friend and very much, unfortunately, a sword to the teachers, but was able for me to network, grow, and everything else. When I got to college, I had worked full time all through college in the restaurant industry. And the service industry is almost like wrestling. It's one-on-one. Like you got a table that complains to your manager, you may be in trouble. If it's second, third, fourth, you're out. And there were those situations, man, where when someone say the wrong thing, it didn't matter about my job anymore. That customer I was ready to box, and you can't navigate the world that way. So I had to learn through getting fired a lot, getting into fights and losing a lot, and really learning that it was all on me, not anyone else externally. met a college student. It's really funny because I'm really very good friends with her. I think she's in her late 70s. She just was at my in-laws' 60th anniversary party. Can you imagine going to college? You're there, you're like 18 years old. I don't even know how. She's probably gonna be pissed, but like she's definitely like 20 years older than me. She's maybe like 38 or 40. And to me, when you're 18, they seem like they're 60. I'm sure my kids
Right.
think that about me now, like he's 80 or whatever. But I, I just, she was there and she was in a psychology class. And I remember we became fast friends and she became almost like a second mother to me. But what was great is because she wasn't my mother, she didn't have the baggage of history between us. And she really, because she was older, had her own children, went through her own divorces, she was able to really to get me on track by explaining the principle very, very early on. Take charge. If you want to change your circumstances, be the change yourself. And really, if you feel like you're a victim, if you feel put upon, if you feel insulted, if you feel all of that stuff, that's on you. And I think gradually through the years in college, working full time and doing a lot of self-help, therapy, books, religion, faith, spirituality, all of that stuff, I started changing. And I still was a pessimistic person, Chris, and I don't remember when it switched, but it really was. I'm noted for saying flip it like a pancake, but there was a day, and I don't remember when, and I think that's when my business started to really grow. I mean, it was one person. We're about 30 people, 9 lawyers now, and I don't have plans for growing much further than that. I'll explain later, but I stopped thinking about the glass half full and started thinking about glass half empty, and started thinking about the glass half full. And those cliches are cliches, but I can just tell you, like, it's amazing. If something negative comes up now, I keep thinking to myself, the glass half full. And since I've been able to, and I think there was years of coaching and therapy and all that other stuff, but I was able to come to the simple slogan for myself to basically say, what are you going to think about in life? You're going to be a pessimist or an optimist. That's it. Religion came into play a little bit later, just recently, but I mean, quite frankly, that's kind of what did it for me.
That's incredible. It makes me think of that Jocko Willco book. It's like fully, total accountability and starting to have this awareness, because I imagine back then you probably didn't have the awareness that it was occurring, and then you had these individuals that gave you a different perspective, which is amazing that you had that.
I would just tell you, it's only amazing because really it came down from a deep-seated insecurity I had about myself. My sons are very talented. They were linebackers in school. They finished top of their class. They both worked full-time at NYU. But even with them, there's always something that is, maybe it's a genetic trait, but there's always that, if you see that defensiveness, they weren't picked on. In fact, they were the popular kids in school. But it's really, if you feel, I mean, obviously there's crimes and robberies and there's people that come up with some whacked out feelings about energy. But I mean, yes, there's true about energy, but people don't choose to be victims of crimes. But you could choose to be a victim of a lot of other circumstances or choose not to be. And once I realized that all that flowed from inside, from a deep level of insecurity and not accepting myself for who I was, the world changed after that. But really, that's what's awesome about it, was that accepting and being accountable for the fact that I was not feeling good about myself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And it didn't just change in a small way. You didn't just go to law school. So you graduated cum laude and you had this drive that came within yourself. And now you have the second chance lawyer where you talk about taking control. So, I'm curious, how does your experience translate to how you help your clients get from the victims of circumstances to kind of the masters of their own destiny? And, what goes into that?
What's interesting about that? My original reason for being a lawyer was in 6th grade, and there was no other reason but feeling powerless about my parents' breakup, powerless about some of the stuff that my mom was going on a personal level, powerless about my father getting into a new relationship. And I became maybe a lawyer for the wrong reason initially, because I decided one day, without seeing any courtroom drama or anything, I'm going to be a lawyer. And I know that the deep rooted reason for that was to have power, which is funny because that is the value system in my firm right now, which I can get into later. But that's the reason why I became law school. And what made me driven, again, was probably for the wrong reasons, was to just gain power. But at the whole time I was driven, and I'm driven now still, but back then I was driven and killing myself inside because I was driven to succeed, to make up for a lack of who I felt for myself inside. And that's changed. So to answer your question about second chances, simply put, there have been people in my history who've given me second chances. An employer, for example, that allowed me to stay on after I really screwed up in the kitchen and went after another employee in the kitchen and really spent time with me, gave me a chance. A professor that gave me another chance when I turned in assignments late because I was just a schmuck and didn't want to do it their way. There was plenty of people that gave me chances, and I wish I could give you one big story about a second chance. There was all these little examples of people in my life that were really trying to help me change. So when we deal with clients that have been injured in accidents and seriously injured, they really need to get a second chance. And the more injured they are, Chris, what's interesting is the more the less focused they are on obtaining compensation. I've been doing this 30 years and it is never changed.
Have never heard that. That's incredible. And that makes sense.
And we advertise a lot of criminal defense and do a lot of online advertising for that, but we do not. We have some PI stuff on our site, but we don't really market PI because what we're looking for are those people that really deserve a second chance. And that comes usually in, you could play the numbers game, of course, and get them that way, but usually comes in through other lawyers, vendors, people, community service, people that you've dealt with in the community. And then on the criminal side, that's even easier, right? It makes sense. Like if you've made a mistake, obviously you could be innocent, not made a mistake, but if you made a mistake, it's about getting you that second chance. And that is very, very important. And that comes from a deep-seated, it comes from grace, actually. People showed me grace. And so we need to show other people grace and being grateful for what we have.